Thank you for joining our weekly live podcast recording of Transformation Ground Control. We do this recording every Tuesday, same time, same place, to YouTube, Facebook, LinkedIn, and Twitter. So thanks for being here. We're going to cover today's topic, which is digital strategies to consider for 2024. So we're really looking at sort of what's changed in 2023 and what we need to know in 2024 as we define our digital strategies and roadmaps for the coming year. My name is Eric Kimberling. I'm the CEO of Third Stage Consulting. We're an independent consulting firm that helps clients throughout the world reach the third stage of digital transformation success. And like I said, this is part of the Transformation Ground Control podcast. Every Tuesday, we're going to take live questions from the audience here today. So we'd love to hear where in the world you're joining from today to start. If you don't mind just dropping in the chat what city and country you're joining from. It's always fun to see where the global audience is joining us from here today. So if you don't mind, just drop in the chat what city and country you're joining from. We'll also use that same chat feature to address any questions and comments you might have as we go through the conversation. So please be sure to drop those in the chat. We're keeping an eye on the stream on all the platforms here as we get going here. I'll introduce our guest here in just a moment, who's someone who's been on this podcast before, and I'll let him introduce himself. But digital strategies to consider for 2024 is the topic. This will be part of the Transformation Ground Control podcast episode that gets released next week. So you're part of the live production of the show by being here today. So thank you for that. We have new episodes of Transformation Ground Control every Wednesday. You can go to transformationgroundcontrol.com to get past episodes as well as the most current episodes as well. So I already see people dropping in the chat where you're joining from today. We're going to come back to that here in just a second. But before we do that, I wanted to introduce and welcome to the show, back to the show, Greg Benton. Greg, thanks for being here today.
It's a pleasure to be here, Eric. I'm excited to talk with everybody about what's coming for 2024.
Absolutely. Glad to have you. You're the perfect guy to chat about this. You're the Chief Strategy Officer here at Third Stage Consulting. But tell us a little bit about your background.
Well, for the last 25 years, Eric, as you well know, I've been working with clients, with software vendors, with systems integrators to implement and manage the digital transformation and strategies that enterprise leaders have put in place to really move their organizations forward in a way that is the taking advantage of the newer technologies, replacing older enterprise systems, and really looking at the digital transformation as a holistic picture, right? And equipping our third stage consultants and directors and so forth with the tools and the understanding of the marketplace and the environment, and making sure that they are able to help our clients with their digital strategies going forward as well.
Right. Yeah. Good background. You have a broad exposure, not only in your past career and leading up to your time at Third Stage, but even just here at Third Stage, you've had a lot of exposure to a lot of different clients, a lot of different industries, a lot of different technology platforms. You've seen a lot of the emerging technologies and evolutions of technology here over the last many years. So that's why you're the perfect guy to have this conversation with here today. And before we jump into a couple questions I have to get us started, and again, we're going to turn to the audience to get their questions as they come in here. But before I get to my questions to start, I wanted to just sort of acknowledge where people are joining from here today. Thank you for dropping in the chat where everyone is. We have someone from Johannesburg, South Africa, India, Spain, Melbourne, Chicago, Istanbul, France, Colorado, India, San Diego, Texas, really all over the world. So thank you everyone for being here today. And it's fun.
Pretty amazing.
It is. Yeah, you get a global group of people like this, like-minded people trying to talk about and predict what might happen in the future, which is always fun, right? So
that's what we do.
That's what we do. But before we talk about 2024, if we sort of look at the year in review here, if we just look at 2023, what are there any technology or digital transformation trends that most surprised you in the last year, or things that excited you or surprised you along the way?
That's a great question. There were one thing that surprised me is that it's already 2024. So right. 2023 is gone, right?
Right.
But no, the two things that really surprised me and shocked me, frankly, one was the adoption of AI and machine learning within enterprise systems, right? So everyone's talking about how processes need to be improved, processes need to be mapped to new systems that are being implemented as digital transformation. And AI and machine learning are going to accelerate that process for anyone that's looking to make a change, right? So
Right.
we can get into that a little bit later, but the other thing that really amazes me is the continuing evolution from ERP, enterprise resource planning, to the holistic picture of digital enterprise operations, right? So instead of implementing a single ERP platform or system, enterprise that is forward looking is really saying, what am I going to be doing for the next 10 years? What am I going to be doing for the next 20 years? And how are my existing and legacy systems going to interlace with that new platform that I'm needing to put in place to stay relevant, competitive, accomplish the mission that my organization has? I mean, that evolution to digital enterprise, or DEO, has really accelerated over the last year.
Yeah. And what it seems to be doing is opening up a bunch of alternatives and options for organizations, giving more options to choose from. So in other words, they don't have to
Yeah.
just go down the route of a traditional ERP system or traditional enterprise technology. They can use interoperability and digital enterprise operations approach to sort of find the best technologies that work best for them, maybe even pull in some of their legacy systems that they can't replace for whatever reason right away. It gives you a lot of different options and paths you can go down. What about, here's an interesting question from Kyler on LinkedIn that I thought would be interesting to jump into. She asked, what is an underrated digital strategy that you wish organizations prioritized? Or an unrated digital strategy, I guess is what she said.
Underrated?
It says unrated. Maybe she does mean underrated. Let's go with underrated. I think that's what she meant.
I think from an underrated standpoint, the preparation of the organization before you even get into a selection process and determining where you're going to go. So taking a healthy phase zero approach to understanding what the organization needs to do, planning clear objectives for what the end state needs to look like, and building the business case around moving the entire organization forward, rather than having disparate departments within the organization wanting to go one direction and another direction. You really have to establish that executive alignment up front, as many of our clients have figured out and do really well, right? And those that don't tend to flounder. They tend to take an inordinate amount of time and expense to decide on a single software system as a technology, and not really looking at the people and process part of that whole equation, right?
Yeah.
And that's what I think is underrated, is the preparation of the organization. What do you see in that, Eric? Does it line up with you?
Yeah, I would agree with that. I mean, the phase zero implementation planning, and really just the whole exercise of clearly defining what it is you want to be when you grow up as an organization is something that a lot of organizations just overlook. And they sort of jump past that and say, well, let's just go find some technology and then that'll help us figure out what we want to be when we grow up. But it's sort of a chicken and the egg sort of problem, where if you don't have a clear vision of what your future state operating model is, or what you want your organization to look like, and what, how exactly you want to standardize business processes or things like that, those are big decisions, right? And those are big rocks you need to move and figure out how to define that, so that you can find the technology and define the roadmap that best fits that. And so I think I totally agree with that. And I might add a second one, or maybe a close second, would be the change management. Change management is always underrated. It feels like just not enough focus on the human adoption and the people part of the equation.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. And I think that underrating of the people side of the equation is what leads to incredible expense. The organization gets weary of long and very complicated implementation processes, and without that upfront planning and making sure that you've got project teams that are going to be dedicated to the implementation all the way through, and that you're managing both sides of the implementation, both the systems integrators as well as your own people. that change just doesn't happen. The adoption doesn't become complete, right? So yeah, organizational change is definitely a big part of that.
Yeah. Yeah. Totally agree. Here's a interesting comment from LinkedIn. I don't see who said this, but someone on LinkedIn said, I would like to redefine digital enterprise operations to digital enterprise optimization. So what are your thoughts on that?
Hey,
Is that a valid
I
point?
like that. It's still DEO, right?
Right. Never enough acronyms in this industry. More acronyms, but there you go.
Our business does not have enough acronyms. I mean, TMI.
Right. That's funny. Here's an interesting comment from Gassan on LinkedIn as well. He says focusing resources on AI utilization to cut down on resources being replaced by AI. So that's interesting. Interesting comment.
Love to hear from Gassan. Gassan, one of the things that I think you would agree with, or at least comment on, is the fact that AI is going to change the way that we implement software. So if you think about testing processes for, SIT, user acceptance testing, all of that, it's running scripts. And in the past, it's been consultants sitting side by side with the end users, just going through script after script after script, making sure that the information that's been placed now in your new environment matches up with what you had in your legacy system. A lot of that can be accomplished by AI at this point. Running scripts is, something that instead of taking months, taking days to do that testing process. So that's going to speed and I think remove a lot of the risk in the testing process that goes into implementation.
Right. Yeah. Totally agree. And then Gassan has a follow-up comment here that chief AI officer will be AI. Chief AI officer will be AI.
So another acronym, CAI.
Right. Actually, who is not a real person.
CAIO.
There we go. It's really complicated now. Here's interesting from Jill on LinkedIn. Jill says, what's your perspective on organizations implementing the return to office mandates and the impacts on digital transformation, whether good or bad? What do you think?
I think that, one of the things that we're seeing is with implementations, we became very accustomed to doing everything remotely. And we became good at it, right? So Teams meetings, instead of having an all-day demo or an all-day test session or training sessions, were all conducted remotely. A lot of our implementation clients right now that are going through this under our program management or their own program management are finding that it's difficult to get people to come back into the office, but the results that they achieve with that, kind of side-by-side knowledge transfer in training classes and everything that goes on with regard to planning, that upfront executive alignment takes in-person meetings, not team meetings, not Zoom meetings. But it is difficult to get people to come back in, especially the people that are participating on the project team. So I think we're just going to see a move to get people into the office, especially when it comes to the whole implementation process and going forward.
Yeah. It was fascinating to see right at the beginning of COVID the organizations that struggled to go through the implementations with that remote approach. And I know it could be done. We saw clients do it. Some were more successful than others. But when you think about it, you think about a manufacturing environment, for example, trying to visualize and work through how a manufacturing shop floor is going to be automated or be changed by digital transformation. That's hard to do over a Zoom call, versus actually being out on the shop floor or being in the office.
It's impossible.
Yeah. Yeah. Is in a lot of companies, I think they underrated or underestimated the difficulty that was going to have. So I think, I think that's, the hybrid environment seems to be where a lot of organizations are settling. So I'd be curious to see how that affects transformations as well.
Well, it is helping that in some cases, if we have a subject matter expert that needs to come in from somewhere else, they can join via Zoom, Teams, or any other media and be effective. but you just don't have that collaboration. You don't have the sidebar conversations. You don't have, people pulling together as a real team.
Mm-hmm.
Again, getting back to that change management, it's really difficult if you don't have people sitting side by side.
Yeah. Yeah. Totally agree. Yeah. We didn't even talk about that. That change management piece is very difficult in a 100% remote environment. Not that everything has to be necessarily classroom based training, of course, but just being able to work side by side with colleagues and change managers and people that are actually there to help enable the changes, I think is really important.
That was a
When you look,
great point. That was a great point.
what about when you look to 2024, or as we look to 2024, organizations that we're working with, we're helping them with their digital strategies, defining the roadmaps for 24 and beyond. What are some of the trends you're most excited about that we haven't already talked about?
There are a number of things that are happening. One of those is people coming back to the office.
Right.
so we just touched on that, but no, I'm seeing that the that move toward digital enterprise operations, toward the whole picture, instead of looking at kind of the micro set of I need to replace a piece of technology or making a change for technology's sake. One department decides that they're going to make a move into a software application set, and everybody else is not moving along with that. I think that's changed. There's a lot more visibility across the organization for people needing to make change, and also the advent of AI and machine learning in mapping processes that you're going to improve, or digital enterprise optimization that's going forward. All of those tools coming to bear right now, along with the full move toward cloud and increasing time to value for the large software vendors, the ERP software vendors, is all coming together in a perfect storm in 2024. So I think there's going to be a lot of movement toward setting up your plan for the next 10, 20 years with partners that are going to be able to flexibly change with the new technologies and the interoperability of systems so that you can go forward smoothly rather than having to stall out, start again. And, that's an expensive proposition that nobody wants to go through.
Right. Right. Yeah, absolutely makes total sense. One other trend or potential trend that Ghassan mentions here on LinkedIn is the increase of iPaaS, platform as a service. What are your thoughts on platform as a service, or just software platforms in general as a potential trend?
Well, I think that, for instance, on the interoperability platforms like Palantir, like a Snowflake, the opportunity to get an immediate time to value in terms of setting something up so that analytics and data management can be accomplished across an entire enterprise with even disparate systems, and bringing that into a single corporate instance that then can be managed as a single source of the truth. I think that's the promise of some of the iPaaS platforms that are out there. What do you see on that? You've actually addressed that in a couple of your recent podcasts. So
Yeah, I think there's something to be said for the platform movement. As far as, in other words, not just choosing an application to automate your business, but instead choosing a platform that applications can be built on, or that you can choose from within that ecosystem of the platform.
Legos.
Yeah. Yeah. So it's sort of like the interoperability model in some ways, but different. I mean, the interoperability is more focused on tying together multiple systems, maybe across platforms, whereas the platform as a service, or the platform model, is more focused on, let's go find a platform to build those Legos and build or buy, or both, a bunch of different technologies that we can layer on. So a lot of times, if you think about, for example, Salesforce and their Force platform, people think of Salesforce as a CRM provider, but really it's a platform. There's a platform within that there's a bunch of third-party apps that you can use with or without Salesforce CRM. You could, use Rootstock for manufacturing, or use, other options out there for different functions that are not related to Salesforce or CRM. Even you look at NetSuite, for example. NetSuite and Infor, I know, are two vendors that are sort of moving in that direction of more of a platform. Like, how do we engage with third-party developers to create different apps on our platform? And so it's, I think a lot of vendors are going that direction too. So they're recognizing that, yes, we have this core application that we want to sell, but we also have a whole platform that we can use to create other options for enterprises. And I think the good news in all this, it just creates, I guess it's good news and bad news, creates a lot more options for organizations. I feel like now they have a lot more options than they ever had in the past. So even
Yeah.
more reason to have a solid digital strategy and roadmap and understanding of what it is you're trying to get at.
Well, and to your point, where it used to be discrete application sets or even ERP systems that you would implement, now you have the ability to really bring together a number of different application sets, the legacy systems, everything on a single platform. That's really powerful. I see that as a great change.
Yeah. Here's a good follow-up question from Reem on LinkedIn. Reem says, I'd like you to expand on the point about going from ERP to digital enterprise operations. Many companies feel obligated to upgrade their current ERP. These are huge investments, and they see that as the only way forward. And I guess I would add to that too, especially when you look at these sunset strategies that software vendors are deploying to say you need to get off this old legacy system by 2025 or 2027, whatever the year
Yeah.
is, depending on the vendor.
Yep.
So I guess the question is, do you have more, how do you navigate this whole concept of digital enterprise operations within the context of forced ERP upgrades?
Well, I think that's a good question, and the upgrade of many of the enterprise applications out there. I could mention a few, but virtually every enterprise system that's moved to a cloud platform in the last 5 to 10 years has legacy systems that are on premise, that are single tenant hosted cloud applications, and an upgrade is really a misnomer in many of those cases. It's not an upgrade. It's a completely different set of applications that you're moving to.
Yeah.
So where we talk about an upgrade, that's a very clean way of saying we're going to migrate from our old applications to our new applications. The problem with that is it's a lift and shift that doesn't take into account the fact that you're moving to a completely different operating system substrate. You're moving to, in many cases, a completely different set of applications that is cloud-based instead of on-premise or single tenant. So you don't have the control or the customization capability that you had before. Moving those customizations into a new system is not an upgrade. It's a complete re-implementation of systems. So, that's where I think I make my stand, is the upgrade of old legacy systems on the enterprise side is not truly an upgrade. It truly is a re-implementation or an implementation of new systems. So why not go out and take a look at what is going to sustain us as a business, as an organization for the next 10, 20 years, rather than let's upgrade our old system, take our old processes, move them into the new system. We have an equation for that, right? It's old processes and new technology equals expensive old processes. So you really want to take advantage of this time to understand what your options are from an enterprise standpoint, and then fold that into the entire digital enterprise operations journey or optimization journey as you go forward. What do you see in that, Eric? I mean, that's something that you talk about often.
Yeah. I totally agree with everything you just said. I would also add though that not only is it a re-implementation of software when, let's just say, you're going from SAP ECC to S4HANA, that is a
Yeah.
re-implementation of new
It's a
software.
great example.
Now you have some what's it called? Not economies of scale, but some efficiencies and knowledge of the SAP platform. Going from ECC to S4 HANA is maybe not as difficult as going from ECC to Oracle Cloud. Because those are just two
Right.
totally different even though ECC and S4HANA are two different systems, at least it's the same vendor. They have that same SAP look and feel, and organizations tend to have knowledge bases that can work to their advantage if they're sticking with their current vendor. But what you find, in addition to it being a whole re-implementation of new software that isn't a lift and shift, is also the fact that now you're getting a different system with different capabilities and different strengths and weaknesses than what you had before with, say, ECC. So S4HANA brings new stuff to the table that you might not have had with ECC, but there's also some stuff that ECC has that S4HANA does not. And
Right.
we see that a lot with clients where they just assume that, well, it's got to be ECC plus all the new stuff from S4HANA that we're really getting. That's not the case. So the reason I bring this up is because it's not even just a matter of necessarily choosing a new system. You could decide, let's go look at Oracle and Microsoft Dynamics while we're at it, because this is a total re-implementation. That I totally agree with you. That is something it would behoove organizations to do. But even if you do decide to stick with the same vendor and just go down their cloud upgrade path, you want to find the gaps and the holes in that so that you can figure out how we can address those. And it might be that we need third-party apps or some sort of customization or whatever. There's some other option that we might need to address those gaps. And that's where a lot of companies get in trouble. They don't do that. Then they try to guess as to how long it's going to take, how much money it's going to cost, but they don't have the right inputs or the right understanding of what they're really getting into.
That's exactly why that upfront strategy and planning, phase zero, is really critically important. You establish the total cost of ownership of moving from one system to a new system, or staying with the system that you have, but upgrading to, for instance, the cloud version. I mean, going from Lawson to Infor Cloud Suite is one of those examples, right? But there is a great advantage in some cases in staying with the incumbent, because just exactly as you pointed out, some of the processes, don't have this complete overhaul. Also, you've been with a partner for years that has been working with you on your enterprise business processes, and sticking with that same partner may be a very good move for the organization.
Right.
So you shouldn't just throw the baby out with the bathwater, so to speak, and make a change.
Yeah, totally agree. That's a great question though, Reem. Thank you for that question on LinkedIn. A lot of good questions here. Bear with me as I try to sift through.
Sure.
There was a question, one question that came in earlier that I want to come back to, that sort of building on this whole thread we're talking about, and I'd be curious to get your thoughts on this. This is from Kyler on LinkedIn. She says, Eric, you mentioned in your 2023 trends that we would see the death of the big ERP vendors. Is that still a main prediction continuing into 2024? And first of all, I'll add a caveat that when I say things like big ERP vendors are dead, that's an attention grabber, but I don't really think they're dying. I don't think they're dead. I think they are slowly dying. And I think over time, there's some chinks in the armor of their market share and of their position and their stature in the industry and their relevance in the industry because of all the things we're talking about. You've got all these other trends that are not working against big ERP vendors, but they're alternatives to the big ERP vendors, and they're giving customers more options and different paths they can go down. They don't have to just upgrade to S4HANA because SAP tells them they should. I guess my point in that prediction that I originally made is that the big software vendors like SAP, Oracle, Microsoft, they're violating the trust of their customers. And I think long-term that's going to hurt them because they're forcing these premature migrations to the cloud because it's in their best interest. It's in the vendor's best interest, but not necessarily the customers. So I think it's creating a lot of chaos and confusion and panic in the industry that will probably come back to haunt them. And to your point, Greg, it's causing organizations to say, well, if this is a total re-implementation going from ECC to S4HANA or going from Microsoft Dynamics AX to D365 or whatever, we might as well just go out and look at some other vendors. So I think that's what I mean when I say the death of big ERP. I think over time, if they continue to operate this way and the market forces and the options continue to proliferate in the marketplace, I think eventually you may not see these three big vendors as the dominant players. All we have to do is look back at Bond. Bond used to be the number one ERP vendor in the marketplace. It wasn't that long ago. And where's Bond now? It's buried somewhere within Infor right now, and they're trying to figure out ways to get people off Bond into other Infor products. So I'd be curious to get your thoughts though on that. What do you think about the big ERP vendors and what all these trends we're talking about, what does it mean for the big ERP vendors, in your opinion?
Well, I've had an opportunity over the last year and a half to see the roadmaps for a lot of the large ERP vendors. And I would respectfully disagree with you a little bit in terms of the death of the ERP vendors. I think the ERP vendors are pivoting and incorporating new technologies and things like marketplace, where people that are using their enterprise systems can go out and pick up new functionality, new technology, and basically plug and play into their existing systems. Those things are changes that are rapidly keeping the large enterprise systems relevant. What I am seeing is a death of the. This is going to be controversial. So death of the GSIs. So the global SIs that actually implement and influence the sale of different software systems into organizations, I think have not been trustworthy in that idea that they would go in and independently choose the best solution for a client, for their business, for their operations. They actually try to steer things in a direction that's going to point toward their own implementation practice that is aligned with a single ERP vendor. And so that's what I think is going to be dying. I think that the large enterprise systems, the ERP systems, are understanding that has been going on for a long time, and they're taking things into their own hands. That's the direction I think that's going. So
I guess what we can both agree on is that there's going to be disruption to the industry. It's just a matter of the incumbents in the industry are going to be disrupted. It's just a matter of how significant and which ones are going to be the most impacted, whether it's the GSIs or the vendors or some combination of both.
Well, think about this, Eric. I mean, as everyone is looking at new technologies, they're looking at changing things for their people, for their processes. We're coming out of COVID. People are coming back into the office. Things are changing with the way that people operate systems and support systems ongoing, right? As all of that change is happening, everyone's needing to get with that change in one way or another. So very disruptive. My business, in order to keep up with the business down the street, it's got to automate a lot of the processes that we currently have. We've got to update everything that we've got from a security standpoint, from an enterprise operations standpoint, from an analytics and data standpoint. And where are the resources going to come from to be able to accomplish all of those implementations, all of that change? Some of it can be absorbed by AI, making processes, much more rapid from an implementation standpoint, from the testing standpoint that we talked about, and testing automation. But you're still going to have consultants, and you're going to want the A team to be working on your implementation, right? Yeah. So it comes back to that whole planning process. If you're not planning now for the change that's going to be happening in 2024, getting back to our original point, you're going to be way behind. So that's what I see as just, again, the perfect storm in 2024. It's going to be a lack of resources to do things, a lack of understanding about what's coming next, and a big demand for people to move off of old legacy systems onto new technology and get their people to change and come along with that new technology.
Yeah. Great point. And here's just a follow-up comment, sort of validating or agreeing with what you and I talked about. This is from LinkedIn. The LinkedIn person says, I agree, old wine in a new bottle, but integrating legacy application to the new system, even if you just mentioned SAP ECC to S4HANA, current implementation partners here in India say that the new S4HANA is a complete new setup. So sort of agreeing that S4HANA is not just a re-implementation, or it's not just an upgrade of ECC. It's a completely new setup, which is part of the appeal of S/4HANA. Is a totally different product. It's cloud-based. It's built on
Right.
the HANA platform, et cetera, et cetera. So there are upsides. It's not just that SAP decided just to change everything for the fun of it. They are doing this as an improvement. But so that's the good news. The bad news is it's not as simple as it may sound.
Right.
Here's a really good question. I'd be curious to get your thoughts on. This is from Jill on LinkedIn. Jill says, do you see executives more aligned or less aligned traditionally with how orgs prioritize digital transformation initiatives?
Actually, that is a great point. And I see executives in many of the organizations that we work with much more aligned than they used to be. They have to be. You know, people have come to understand that IT initiatives are not led just strictly by the CIO and the IT department and a few department heads. It actually has to be within the entire organization moving forward, and um, organizations really now get into fiscal planning that says, all right, if we're going to do something, we have to justify it. So as you, Eric, say in your book, in everything that you talk about, beginning with the end in mind is what organizations are doing now from a planning standpoint. So they're getting into that phase zero approach to getting the organization moving in the same direction, understanding what the business case is for implementing it. Nobody's going to implement a new system unless it's justified with the return on investment that is planned in the end state. And so I'm seeing organizations align around that theme, right? What can we do that's best for our people? What can we do that's best for our organization moving forward, either in our mission to take care of patients, to educate students, prepare them for life, or manufacture a product that is going to eclipse other manufacturers of the same product. So that's really just come about in the last 5 years or so. Before it used to just be an IT or an internal project to move to a new technology just for technology's sake. So I think that's changed quite a bit.
Yeah, yeah, totally agree. And it's good to see that. I think first of all, coming back to the question itself, I think the key word here is aligned. Are executives aligned, and how have they prioritized this transformation initiative? Those are two really important points. They're worth noting because you want to make sure the organization as a whole is aligned, beginning with executives, but you also want to make sure the rest of the organization is aligned with what is this digital transformation mean to us? How important is it? What is it we want to accomplish out of it? How do we declare victory? How do we measure it? What's the business value we want? All that stuff, that's all part of that digital strategy and roadmap that in that phase zero planning that you've been talking about too. And hence the whole reason for this conversation. It's important to figure this stuff out and understand on the macro level what all the trends are happening in the background and in the big picture, but then honing in and saying, okay, there's all this stuff, there's all this noise in the industry, all this stuff happening. Let's pick and choose what is important to us and define that clearly define that roadmap and plan to go forward.
I would also say it doesn't really matter where in your journey you are, whether you're at the very beginning or you're in midstream and you've been implementing for 2, 3, 4 years and suddenly realize that, wow, we're not on the verge of going live. We've got to do something and we've got to change course. Getting the executives to align on what that course change needs to be is critically important. So executive alignment might be one of the primary things that dictates whether an organization is successful or not in their digital transformation, no matter where they are in that continuum.
Yeah, I totally agree. Here, Gassan is on a roll, so I'm going to pull up another question from him. He's got a really good one here, or an interesting comment. I'd be curious to get your feedback on.
Gassan, you always do.
He's back. When Gassan isn't here, you notice it's not quite as active in the chat, but he's got a lot of quieter for sure. But Gassan says legacy systems are the root cause for resistance to change versus greenfield implementations. So companies should throw out legacies and start from scratch. And he puts a little smiley emoji there. So I think he's maybe half kidding. But what are your thoughts? I think
I hope he's kidding.
well, what are your thoughts though on this? Do we throw out our legacy systems and just start over? Is that a viable strategy for organizations? Because I think even though he's kidding, or he seems to be kidding, a lot of organizations actually do think that. I mean, there are companies that come to us and say, yeah, let's just, like you said, throw the baby out with the bathwater because it's old, it's broken. We know we need new systems, so let's not worry about what we've got now. Let's go ahead and just jump to the future. What are the
Yeah,
pros and cons there?
I hope Ghassan is kidding because greenfield opportunities are few and far between.
Mhm.
And the reason why is because there are a lot of aspects of the legacy systems that have to be continued. Not only do you have to continue the relationship with the software provider that you've been working with for years, that you're going to be continuing to pay a subscription to, or pay licensing and maintenance to over the next year to 2 years to 3 years that you're implementing the new technology. You also just you need to incorporate some of the things that you can't change right away. I think in some of the CAD systems that go along with manufacturing processes and engineer to order, a lot of the X-ray and digital systems that go along with healthcare, the enterprise, the EHR, or electronic health records that go along with the enterprise system that you're implementing. All of that has to be interoperable. It all has to be sequenced at the proper stage in your journey going forward. So as you're getting into digital transformation, you have to incorporate those things that are going to be brought along and consolidated, moved out, kept in place. And so that's why the whole picture of digital enterprise operations needs to incorporate what are we going to keep, what are we going to change, what are we going to, just completely, in Ghassan's words, greenfield implement, right? So all of that has to be factored in.
Right. Yeah. Makes total sense. Coming back to a comment you made early on, Greg, you talked early on in this conversation about generative AI or AI in general. This is from Reem on LinkedIn. Reem says, can we talk about AI/Gen AI readiness? What do companies need to have in place in order to use both of these technologies?
Well, I don't know that they have to have a technology in place to adopt Gen AI. I think that that's being incorporated in a lot of the ERP systems. It's being incorporated in a lot of the platforms that we've been talking about. I don't think that anyone's going to be able to avoid using AI. I recently heard at a conference with the Pharmaceutical Sciences Group in Toronto that AI is being used to optimize processes within the healthcare environment that are really just a matter of being able to replace the kind of the motion studies that used to go on with how processes are conducted within an organization. And now they are being automated. You can place agents on desktops to see how people actually click through different application sets. And you can find that optimized way of performing any operation within an organization. So I don't think it's so much preparation as it is learning to adopt and change with the flow. As more and more AI becomes available to us and is used in different ways, we have to adjust to that. And I think that's going to be the biggest thing coming.
Yeah. Yeah. Makes total sense. And then there's also the data consideration too, just making sure that these reams of data that your organization has accumulated over the years, that it's cleaned up, that it's relevant, that it can actually be used for AI and Gen AI purposes. I think that's a prerequisite as well, just making sure that the data piece of it has been addressed. And that's true whether you're going with an AI model or analytics or even just business intelligence and reporting, more fundamental business intelligence and reporting. You need those strong data inputs as well.
Eric, are you getting back to that whole phase zero and data cleansing
I'm teeing
discussion?
it up for you. Yes. Yeah, it's funny. We just keep coming back to that. You do that phase zero strategy, roadmap, plan, all that stuff up front. That's it's not going to solve all your problems, but it's going to help you work through some of these things. So, for example, if you know you're going down the path of AI, the data and some of the things you talked about as well. These things are going to be major activities within that roadmap, and you can start to lay out and figure out how you're gonna go about that.
Right, right.
So, what if we look to risks? What do you think the biggest risks are that organizations will face in their transformations in 2024? Maybe that might be different or more risky, than in years past.
I think that one of the risks is embarking on the journey that we've been talking about for digital transformation and not doing your homework. Homework's that's not even the right term. Where people are making decisions to work with a certain platform provider or a software vendor, that is a partnership that's going to last over the next 10, 20 years, right?
Right.
You're not going to do this again. You're not going to implement an entire new software system or digital transformation in 2 years after you just embarked on it this year. So you have to make sure that you choose the right partners going forward. And that's what I think that people are not understanding the complete nature of that. So they've got to have it focused on their business and certainly that planning and phase zero piece again. But you also have to choose partners that are going to be with you in the entire journey, that are going to be able to adapt to the new technologies that are coming in that journey as well. And going with somebody like we're implementing JD Edwards or Bond or something like that as an older system that is going to replace an older system or be an upgrade. Is that really going to be relevant in 5 or 10 years, or are we going to have to implement something new? So I think that's the biggest threat in 2024 is not looking forward enough. Things are changing rapidly, so that over the next 12 months, things will probably change and change again in 2 years. But you've got to have partners that are going to be sustainable all the way through that entire journey.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and I think the key there is partners. You talked about the death of the big GSI model earlier, the big global system integrators.
Yeah,
Part of the problem there is, to your point that you made earlier, they're focused on one technology when in reality, most organizations need multiple technologies to automate or to enable their digital transformations. And so having multiple partners that can help you navigate that, and then also having that PMO, that program management on top of and integrating the entire program, the entire transformation,
true.
that's another key component too. What are your thoughts on the PMO side of it? I know that's something that you might be almost as passionate about PMO as you are phase zero implementation
Oh, I
planning.
am. Well, the known industry statistic that we put out there all of the time that everyone has agreed upon is 70 to 80% of implementations fail to meet objectives for an organization. And as you're bringing together multiple systems that you just described, so you may be implementing an ERP system like an Infor, an SAP, an Oracle, as well as Salesforce, as well as UKG from a workforce management perspective. All of those pieces coming together need to be coordinated, managed, and too often that management is left up to the software vendor. It's left up to the systems integrator, whereas, as I do call them, the wrench turners that do a great job of implementing that software system, right? But it's one software system. So bringing that all together under an umbrella and assigning the right governance within the organization as an extension of your internal team is vitally important to a successful roadmap for the entire digital transformation.
Mm,
So PMO is critical.
yeah. Now, in addition to PMO, um, you and I, and especially me, are excited about change management, the human side of change. So back to another comment from Gassan. His comment here is we need a bit of emotional intelligence as people are seeing automation taking over some of their jobs. literally change management will be changed to AI. But even if we set aside AI and just focus on technology in general, I think he has a really good point here about needing emotional intelligence as automation becomes more advanced, whether it's with AI or some other form of automation. It's a threat to people's jobs. It's a disruption. It's just becoming increasingly more difficult for humans to adapt to these changes because the technology has changed so fast. The technology can do so much, which is a net positive, but the negative, the thing that could undermine that net positive, is the fact that you've got these human reactions to it. So, how does change management, how do you see change management fitting into this phase 0 digital strategy roadmap planning, that whole bucket that we've been talking about? How do you see change management fitting into that?
Well, as somebody put in a book, it starts with the end in mind. This is a shameless plug for the final countdown.
Someone had to do it, so thank you for doing that. Take it.
The way that people need to look at this is organizational change doesn't start when you've got the implementation in place and you're about to go live and you're taking everyone through training. Organizational change starts from the very beginning. So it's the preparedness of the organization to move into something new. And yeah, there's a lot of fear around AI and what it's going to do, and I think that's largely attributed to the Terminator movies that we saw back in the 80s.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But I think it's going to help things. I think it's going to improve processes. And when we see people, hundreds of people in a meeting talking about where the organization is going, what their mission is, how we're going to embark on this implementation of a new technology for the organization. And we see this quite a bit in kickoff meetings, right? The organizational change has to happen with communication. This is not you losing your job or taking anything away from you. It's making your job better. It's simpler. It's more streamlined. So, that intelligence piece of this, you have to connect with what people are doing in their day jobs and make sure that they understand that this is being put in place so that you are better at your job, so that things are going to be simpler, easier, and it's going to be rainbows and sunshine all the way through. Not quite that rosy, but we do have to start with that end in mind. And this is what you're going to get as a reward when we get through all of this, and then get everyone aligned with making that move from the very beginning.
Yeah, and it's easy to fall into the trap of thinking that's not going to be difficult, because when we're talking about phase 0 implementation planning, defining a strategy and roadmap, that's when you're sort of the most optimistic as a team in an organization. Not because you want to lose that optimism, but because that's where you see the possibilities, you get excited about the possibilities, you get some clarity around how we're going to move off of our broken, outdated systems onto something new. So that's when the excitement is generally the highest. So it's easy to overlook the change management piece and say, well, everyone's excited. I don't know what the problem is. People aren't going to resist this. They're excited. But then the problem is inevitably, when you get into the reality of what the changes mean, that's when organizations start to push back and people start to freak out and have negative reactions that undermine the excitement that was original. So I think you have to sort of anticipate that people are going to become somewhat of a buzzkill, if you will. At some point, they're going to become and that's a technical term that we use in the industry, the buzzkill thing. In case you didn't know, but it is something that undermines that excitement. So you've got to have a change strategy and plan that will allow you to overcome that, and that should be part of that phase 0 plan and that overall digital strategy.
Yeah, you've always done a great job of really just kind of evangelizing that whole change management from the very beginning, and it's absolutely true.
Yeah. Well, I guess just to maybe close it out here, and I think I might know what you're going to say to this just based on what you've said so far, but I'll ask it anyway. But what closing advice would you give to organizations and project teams that are about to begin a digital transformation in 2024 in order for them to define that digital strategy that makes the most sense for them?
Well, Eric, I think that's a couched question, right? First of all, begin early and often, because as we talked about, everyone's going to be going through this change. Everyone's going to be, frankly, fighting for the resources, for the understanding of their organizations and moving forward in a single direction, accomplishing change in the smoothest manner possible. I think that beginning with the end in mind, as we were just talking about, going through that phase zero and organizational planning and doing it quickly, and then moving into a plan that is in alignment with the organization, with the executives, and not something that's pushed down through the organization, but something that is actually moving everyone forward at the same time. That's what I think that has to happen very early in 2024 if it already hasn't happened for your organization.
Yeah, it's great. Great closing advice. I mean, that is something that you can do, and that's certainly something that, or that's something you should do, and that's something that Third Stage can help with. I mean, being independent tech agnostic, that's a big part of what we do for our clients is help them define what their needs are, what the strategies and roadmaps are for their transformations in the coming year or years. And also, I know Kyler dropped it in the chat, at least on LinkedIn. She dropped a link to Amazon where you can buy the book that you just did the shameless plug for, Greg. It's called The Final Countdown. It's my first and newest book that's out on Amazon. You can just go to thefinalcountdown.com and it'll take you to the Amazon page where you can read more about it, read the reviews, and order it if you'd like. So that's available worldwide. Check it out at thefinalcountdown.com. And of course, you can learn more about Third Stage Consulting by reaching out to either Greg or I. If you'd like to chat about your digital transformation, your digital strategy, how we can help, or if you just have informal questions you want to bounce off us, please feel free to reach out. We're happy to be a sounding board for you all as you define your roadmaps for the coming year. You want to pick our brains or whatever, we make ourselves available. So reach out to either of us, and you can learn more about us at Third Stage Consulting as well. So Greg, thank you for being here today. Really appreciate you taking the time. This is a great conversation. Time flew by, as it always does when you and I get together talking about this stuff. So
we could talk all day, but thank you very much, Eric. Really appreciate it, and everyone that joined.
Yeah, absolutely. And thank you to the audience for the great questions as always. And you can find this interview will become part of Transformation Ground Control episode that gets released a week from tomorrow, Wednesday of next week. TransformationGroundControl.com is where you can find all the past episodes of this show as well. So be sure to check it out there. We'll edit it. We'll add some more content to this interview, clean it up, add some music, make it look cool, and it'll become part of the formal Ground Control podcast episode next week. So thank you everyone for your time. Hope you have a great week, and we'll see you next week, same time, same place for our weekly podcast interview.
See you later.
All right. Thanks again.